Skinner. Please welcome onto the stage the chairman of the board of directors of Alfa-Bank, Petr Aven, the global head payment and products platform at Visa, TS Anil, the governor of the Central Bank of Russia, Elvira Nabiullina, the president of Rostelecom company, Mikhail Oseevsky, the founder and the chairman of the board of Tinkov Bank, Oleg Tinkoff, the head of Talent and Success Foundation, Elena Shmeleva.
Доброе утро. I'm afraid I don't speak Russian, so I'll speak English. And I'm going to give a presentation after this panel about my view of the future, the very near future. But we're going to start this morning with looking at the very far future, 2035. What will the world look like? And that's quite difficult because 15 years from now, if you think about 15 years ago, it was a very different world. The iPhone hadn't been invented, and we didn't have cloud computing. We didn't have anything like the world of today with apps and services that we live with in our day-to-day lives, for getting taxis, for getting rooms, for ordering services, for finding places. If you had a map 15 years ago, it was a physical map to find where to go. It was a very different world. In fact, it's quite funny in that I just received an update the other day from a bank in Britain called First Direct, which is a bank without branches, celebrating their 30th birthday. And 30 years ago, they said that everybody would walk into a bank branch and deposit a check, and the idea of calling up the bank was impossible. It was like a revelation, because everybody had rotary telephones. 1989, very different to today. 2004, very different to today. So 2035, I have no idea how we will speculate what 2035 will look like. But I'm delighted that I'm joined by my 6 guests on this panel who will try to give us an idea as to how the future will look. I don't know what they're going to say, so I'm going to have my headset and I'm going to listen intently to begin with the words of Elvira from the Bank of Russia around your views on what does the future look like? Elvira.
Well, I fully agree to what you have said. It is indeed very hard to imagine what the future would look like. I'm not exactly a very good futurologist, and if earlier futurologists would be talking a forecast of 100 years, now I think it is still a faraway future to think of the future of 15 years to come. It still requires quite an imagination. It's hard for me to imagine what new technologies will look like, but quite obviously those technologies would be replacing one another very quickly and would be very quickly changing our lifestyle, the economy and finance, of course. I think the financial industry will no longer be a purely financial industry. Why? Because people do not want to have financial services as such any longer. It is important for us to get all the services quickly, smoothly, preferably for free. We want them to be completely secure. And of course, the expectations and demands for the quality of services would be very high. They have to be properly packaged. Today we talk a lot about technologies and the players who will have access to certain technologies. For example, in Russia, we're quite concerned that small players in the financial market cannot afford large-scale investment in what defines the technology mindset today. However, I think the technologies will become cheaper, they will become more affordable, and there will be an increasing value of the human factor and human relationship. Yesterday at the panel, Alfa-Bank representative was talking about phygital as a new trend, a combination of physical and digital. I think it is accurate. Of course, the competition will be increasing, and the measure of success of financial companies would be defined by other factors, not the ones that are important today. For example, yesterday we've been talking a lot about the matter of ownership of data and access to data, data protection. I think in 15 years, by 2035, those issues might be successfully resolved because those issues are defined today properly, and I think the society will come to a stage of open API, successful exchange of data between different market players, not just financial sector, but also cross-sectoral data exchange, exchange of data between the state and the commercial companies. And the success will be defined by the ability to efficiently analyze data, fast decision-making process, and design of products and services that is wanted by the customer. Undoubtedly, market will no longer be guided by the financial institutions as such, but rather hybrid organizations. The financial organization will be much broader, there will be new players coming to the market, and of course it will be a challenge for the regulator, how to regulate this new market, and it will be necessary to regulate it because there still will be risks for the users. They will be different, probably connected with cybersecurity, and new risks might emerge we cannot envisage today, but the role of the regulator will still be there. It will be different, of course, and we'll have to adapt to that. We're used to regulate based on an institution type. We know how to regulate a bank, an insurance company. We're aware of their risks, we're aware of the landscape. But the landscape will be completely different, and we will have to adapt to this change as well. And it is important that the regulators of the financial markets demonstrate the necessary flexibility and openness to innovations. We, as the central bank globally, remain quite conservative in our nature because we first and foremost think about risks. And our key objective is stability, financial stability, price stability. But under conditions when technology changes rapidly, the conservative nature might become a factor of risk per se. The conservatism of a regulator is unacceptable. We cannot lag behind, being like old generals being prepared for the war that is long over. We're aware of this risk and of this challenge, and I hope that we'll be able to change together with the market. But what is important is that in this strands, we need to be aware of the fact that the financial sector per se will present a totally new quality of services to the citizens, to businesses, and I hope that it will become much more competitive as it is in Russia today.
Thank you very much, Elvira. And interesting insights in terms of saying it will no longer be a financial industry, but we'll still have a lot of financial firms around, and the regulator will still be absolutely key in their role of providing stability to this industry, which I agree with. And it's interesting when I say so much has changed in the last 15 or 30 years that one of the key things that hasn't changed is that the banks and the regulators are still just as key in the markets as they ever were. And I think you're right, in 15 years from now that will still be the case. Peter, from Alfa-Bank, a bank that I've known quite well as an innovator for some years. So maybe you can give us your views on the future.
Thank you. Well, it is hard to say something out of the ordinary and not banal. We all share the same thinking in this regard. I would probably ponder on what was mentioned earlier on phygital. We had a discussion several years ago. We were saying that there will be no longer physical aspect of our interaction. And in our bank, we spent a lot of time discussing whether we actually need the physical offices and branches of the bank. If you take a look at the European banks, and the ones whom we consider to be our peers and probably the most successful banks in Europe in terms of equity and OTP, I would say that for one office we have 2 times more customers as compared to them. We are heading towards digitalization, but still, nonetheless, at the moment we need our offices and we use them actively. And I was convinced that people would still want to have this physical presence alongside with a computer and a smartphone. They would want to have this actual human communication. And I'm quite convinced that the outstanding digital bank by Oleg Tinkoff is opening up their corners at their shopping malls where they're selling credit cards to their customers is just a proof to this fact. You cannot do everything via internet. Mr. Tinkoff normally argues the figures and statistics I cite, but today I'm confident to say that in Tinkoff Bank now there are more humans working than in Alfa-Bank. That's my comment on digital. So a small bank with a lot of employees, that's what Tinkoff Bank is today. And I think that is a very obvious case. Later we'll be discussing the labor market. Of course, we understand everybody needs more software engineers and data scientists, but stably we see demand for humanitarian sciences as well, because talking to people and communication in business is becoming efficiently important. Over the last 15 years, we've heard about the importance of emotional intelligence that is no less important than IQ per se. So it's all about the efficiency of human communication. And I'm convinced that you would not be ready to give a lot of money to somebody who you do not see, who you cannot talk to. So this idea of phygital that Vladimir was talking about yesterday is fundamentally important. As for the technological changes, I would say many years ago, when we launched our bank in the 90s, the popular buzzword was financial supermarket. Well, today we see that actually the process of sales of anything in one place is important. The accumulation of different types of sellers, the exchange of opinion, their knowledge is important. Anything they can bring, and this merger is the most obvious thing today. The merger of telecom and banks, it's obvious trend. We've been talking about it for 10 years now, but it's only now that we actually see that happening. We have Alfa-Bank and Wimpelcom in one group, and just today we see the actual teamwork starting, the ability to offer services from the balance of telecom and act as a financial institution, which requires certain regulatory changes, that's for sure, and Madam Nabiullina was talking about it. On the other hand, bank is learning to use huge data sets that are available with telecom, and the same will be happening with the retail chains and bank integration of all types of services and institutions. And I guess that is the largest challenge that we face today. Digitalization of telecoms was relatively slow in the whole world because there was no proper model. Now we have this model, symbiosis and integration of financial institution and telecoms and different types of vendors from different lifestyles is a great technological challenge, and those who will be able to make it will be the winner in this situation. Actually, it requires a lot of emotional skills and emotional intelligence, being ready to work with a different type of experts, different type of industry. And I guess this is something we need to realize. Phygital on the one hand, and the merger and symbiosis of different type of vendors and sellers is important. It will all be brought to one point. Of course, the banks will always keep their competences and their focus. That is also obvious. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think in many ways you said many things I agree with in terms of emotional intelligence and human communication. But I'm guessing that Oleg, you may have some issues with how Peter started his discussion around Tinkoff having more people than Alfa-Bank as a digital bank. So, Oleg, maybe you can give us a view of the future from Tinkoff Bank's viewpoint and respond to Peter's challenge.
Thank you for the question. Good morning. Well, Peter, I do not know how many employees do you have in Alfa-Bank? 27,000 people you have, we have 23,000. Well, it's not something to be proud of for sure. I'm going to talk about AI, at least that I was planning to do. And I hope in this regard I'll be able to impress you and tell you how in the nearest future we are going to tackle this unpretty figure using AI. Just a small clarification, we do not have physical offices and branches of the bank. What you have seen, the corners and the shopping malls, as you said, those were attempts to sell Tinkoff Mobile, our virtual telecom operator. It was just a pilot project. We love doing pilot projects and testing. It was not a branch, of course, and I'm not surprised. We could run a test and open up one office. It doesn't prove anything, but fundamentally, while I'm the controlling shareholder of Tinkoff company, I'm sure we are not going to open any physical offices. Once I leave the company and sell my shares, well, it's up to the next management to decide, but so far Tinkoff Bank will not open any physical offices. We were the first in Russia to come up with this idea a long time ago. We said that there must not be any offices 13 years ago, and we're confident that that was the right choice. That is the model of the future. We see that now Raiffeisen Bank is massively closing its offices, Sberbank is doing the same, and it's just the beginning of this trend. And I'd like to emphasize that over these years, without having a single office, we are comparable in terms of active retail customers with Alfa-Bank, whom we certainly respect, but we do not consider Alfa-Bank to be our competitor. We only compete with Sberbank, that is our only competitor, and our objective is to compete with Sberbank successfully, to be the second bank on the market of retail banking in Russia, and to be a big financial lifestyle hub. And generally, we do not compete with other banks because, first of all, the market is huge, and on the other hand, because it simply distracts our attention. Sberbank is big and exciting, and it always fascinates us, and it is exciting to compete with Sberbank. As for the rest, well, we respect all of them, but we're not actually paying attention to them. Well, for me, fundamentally, it is important to make sure that any business is making money. That is the key metrics that we're watching. So if you're doing business in Russia, well, we know that in Russia, for some reasons, capitalization doesn't go successfully. It's absurd. You have to make money. And in order to make money, you have to be smart and you have to do everything right. So for me, the figures of net profit are the most convincing ones. And from this viewpoint, we have a lot of respect towards Alfa-Bank, because Alfa-Bank is demonstrating excellent figures. We see them, we like them. So you just watch the dashboard. We can discuss the trends. I'm sure yesterday you were having exciting conversations here at Phenopolis. There will be more different panels today. However, it is our great sadness that 80% of those discussions are around zero EBITDA, or even businesses that are below the line. Tinkoff Bank is very different in this regard. We are bottom line oriented. We're focused on profits. This year, as you know, we will make more than 35 billion rubles of net profit, and that is important for me. As for the rest, and we will make even more in the years to come, despite the fact that we see that the market situation is deteriorating and the risks are quite worrying, the first indicators we see. However, it is important for me not just to satisfy the customer's expectation and be ahead of everyone and come ahead of the customers' wishes or expectations, but it is also important for me to make money. And in this regard, I understand the audience is mostly comprised of finance experts. I would recommend you take a look at us and use us as an example and make your money. Well, getting just 1% of the transaction fees is not cool.
Thank you, Oleg. And it's nice to know that Sberbank still has impact. TS, Visa, obviously a global company, but very active in the markets here. And I guess your vision of the future will be quite expansive, but please share with us how you see 2035.
Dobro jutro, and thanks for having me, guys. Who's having fun listening to the arguments between these two gentlemen over here? So, it's an interesting question talking about 2035. But if you sort of take a step back and look at the long arc of human history, at any point in that history, the age or the time has been defined by the conflict between different forces. And I think the next 15 years are not different in that respect. There's forces that will compete with each other, and the question really is which of those forces wins out, or if any does. Those forces include the massive trend towards globalization and global connectedness versus the increasing nationalism that we've seen in the last few years. It includes digital connectivity between people, but an increasing sense of isolation. It includes an unprecedented hundreds of millions of people that have come out into the middle class on the one hand, but on the other, massive inequalities between the very rich and the have-nots. It includes this challenge and trade-off between growth on one side and economic prosperity and sustainability and climate change and things like that. So these forces in any age have had a tussle, but in the next 15 years, I suspect the amplitude is going to be increased. So in the next 15 years, I suspect the challenge is that we live in a world where every voice has a megaphone, whether that voice belongs to 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, or whether it belongs to a radical person or to an artist. Everybody has a megaphone and a platform. And in that sort of context, the challenge is that these forces that I described that will, battle each other or compete with each other over the next 15 years, the amplitude and the impacts and the effects, I suspect, will be much more pronounced. So the question really is, how will they play that? How will they play themselves out? And it's hard to call the future, but my own suspicion is in the next 15 years, depending on where you are in the world, depending on where you are in society, you will feel the impact of these competing forces differently. If you're in the already affluent parts of this world, whether in your country or in an affluent geography itself, to some extent you will be protected from these forces and you might come out net positive. If you're in a less advantaged part of society, the impact may be more severe. So, it's going to be fun to watch how this plays itself out. Just one of the forces that we can talk about is the whole idea of artificial intelligence. Right? When someone asks me, look, what do you think will happen in the world of AI? What's the implication going to be in 2035? It's the same thing, right? On the one hand, there's massive benefits to be accrued to our species because of artificial intelligence. An easy one is the augmentation of our capabilities just because we have more tools available to us. Right? A good example of that in the arts is everybody has become a photographer. Remember 20, 30 years ago, when photography was a skill and a few people invested time taking photographs? But today, everybody in this room takes hundreds of photographs a month on their smartphones. And there's filters and different ways to make the photographs look better and better. They all look like professional quality photographs. So it can augment. It can augment the sciences, right? I suspect we will solve cancer, as an example, in the next, in the next few years in a substantive way. So it'll augment. It'll remove the need for people to do either dangerous tasks or dull tasks. Right? Driving is, in the next 15 years, will be mostly AI, I would suspect. But on the other hand, right, even the discussion between, Petr and Oleg just now about which company has fewer jobs, which company employs fewer people. So the impact of AI on jobs is pretty significant. And what that does to society is not trivial. The implication of the loss of manufacturing and blue-collar jobs in politics and society is something that we're seeing in the last few years in countries around the world. So that implication, just at the next level, globally will be interesting to watch. Also, when people have that much time on their hands, who knows what's possible? One segment of people will become better artists and do more amazing things with their lives. Another segment of society will become vulnerable to being exploited in negative ways as well. So how these things will play themselves out will be fun to watch. If I put a Visa hat on, which was where Chris was taking me as well. So Visa is a global payments company, right? Well before these things became buzzwords, we were one of the first cloud companies, right? We've run a whole global network in a cloud-based model with 50 million endpoints of merchants around the world, right? So before cloud was a thing, we were in the cloud. Before the network effect was something that innovators would describe, we built network effect. So to some degree, we have ridden the wave of change in this last few decades. And in the next 15, I suspect that the idea of a payments network that connects buyers and sellers, banks and merchants, individuals and businesses, individuals, that idea will remain one of the most powerful forces for economic progress and for commerce. And we expect to be at the forefront of continuing to impact that future. And I'm happy to sort of go into more detail about this as we go, Chris.
Thank you, TS. We're going to get into more detail during the Q&A around exactly some of the aspects of what each of you are touching upon in regards to the future. But I'd like to move on now to ask Elena a little bit about her views, and particularly, I guess, as you are leading an organization, Sirius, that deals with developing talent, how we will develop talent over the next 15 years to be successful. Elena.
Thanks. As a follow-up of the discussion, I would like to say that we are developing educational programs to meet the challenges. We have to develop something that we do not have now. And we develop programs for the talented and motivated school boys and school girls. And the most important criteria, both now and in the future, will be time. From the point of view of automation, and what I could hear from our speakers and partners, there are systems that can provide analytics, that could provide reports to save time. In the future, time will be something physical, something realistic. It will be the time when the time between idea and its implementation will be very short, and there should be people responsible for the implementation of the idea. So I think the generation of ideas and its implementation would make it possible to implement ideas. All the routine drill work will be automized. New ideas will have to emerge not only with the help of the artificial intelligence, but those ideas will be born due to the activity of human beings and humans perceiving nature and society. And there are school children coming to us, to our school from all the areas of the Russian Federation. And I believe because Russian territory is vast and people, school children are different, we will witness a lot of breakthroughs. And our experience will be well described. The experience of the people could be accessible by the others, and it could be applied in where it is required. And there will be systems when every new knowledge generated by people will be known and accessible by the others. And there will be a situation when we can seek advice from the authors of the idea and to have it embedded in the technological process which is needed. I apologize, I shouldn't mention what I'm going to say now, but finance will not be a priority. Of course, the fintech will be important, but it will be subjugated to the energy of the humans that will be creative, that will be putting ideas on the tables, and the money will flow where there will be teams available to address new challenges. And money will be there, the way our colleagues describe it, but we will need people that will be creating new things. People will be receiving new information in small bits, but all the time, continuously, and making use of this information. And there will be collaboration between the teams. Teams will be important, and members of the teams will bear some logical chains to implement ideas. And every member of the team will have to learn, take decisions immediately based on the personal experience or the experience that of the other people they attract. And I think the sciences, cognitive sciences, will have to help people to have fun of discovering new things. That's why psychology, communication, interpersonal relations will be quite important. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. And last but not least is Mikhail Oseevsky, who's the president of Rostelecom, who I guess you all know as a major telecom provider. We touched on telecoms and finance merging and integrating earlier, Peter in particular. But Mikhail, maybe you can take that conversation further and give us your perspective.
Yes, I will talk about the fintech and telecoms in the end of my talk, but since we are talking about the visionary perceptions, I think that the mankind is moving towards negative interest rates, and I think that's what will happen in Russia as well. And if there are people in Russia who have wealth, and the question that they pose is how to preserve the wealth and capital. And so that's why I have a question for Oleg. You do not have to build branches, but you will have to build deposit boxes, because still the cash will still be there, banknotes will never vanish, and it will be necessary to keep it somewhere. But if talking seriously, we will be having to observe and follow up the evaluation of the companies in the situation when there are negative interest rates. And for us, it is important to show to the market and to the future shareholders the attractiveness of that kind of approach. And we will see the growth of the funds investing into shares. It is not the most popular investment tool now, and I think the financial companies will have to gravitate towards this type of requirements. Since there will be G5 networks, that's our purview of responsibility, with high velocities and huge volume of operations, no delay in transmission of data. The exchange of information at the markets will be faster, and there will be more volume of it. We will be involved in it as clients. Our mobile phones will be a powerful tool to make use the AI technologies. The phone will be always with us, and there'll be no need to make physical contacts with the phone to sell something, and to buy something. We will be viewing the markets not only in Russia but abroad, and there will be an emergence of new second or third life of exchanges, commodity exchanges, currency exchanges, brokers that are working at the financial markets and at the exchange, at the currency exchanges.
Thank you, Mikhail. So that's our opening discussion, and I guess the theme that I get from most of you is the impact in the next 15 years of structural change on education and employment. And it's something I want to explore in further depth, because I don't know how many of you have got kids, but if you have children, obviously we're all concerned about what will our children be doing as jobs in the future. So maybe, Peter, I can start with you and ask what sort of skills, competencies, developments you think will be most important for the future employees of the next 15 years?
There are a lot of predictions, and they believe that from 1/3 to 1/2 of the banking employees will lose their jobs because of the AI and the other techs. And what we witness, like there is a higher demand for technological professions. I used to say that we have 1,000 people involved in IT. Now it is 2,000 in Alfa-Bank, and if we take the adjacent companies, there are thousands and thousands of people involved in it. So data processing will be the skill needed, and I received the information that after 2015 the vacancies in data processing has increased by 5 times, machine learning professions by 5 times, and it's a trivial statement, but I would like to say that everything related to IT will be given high priority. Of course, there's huge competition with Sberbank and the domestic market, but and the international market as well. Programmers leave this country for other countries, so these professions will be in high demand. And another thing, the humanities knowledge will be in high demand as well. And take the developing countries, the emerging economies. People that should have socially important functions, be able to communicate, have interpersonal relations with skills will be important. And it has grown by 40%. The importance of intellectual emotional intelligence is very important as well. And we will need that kind of specialists in the branches. We think that the physical branches will be needed, and of course I think that the companies that will manage to blend the borders between offline and online will be successful, and the people that will merge the technical skills and the humanities skills will also be successful. Two basic educational types like humanities and technical. And there was a question about children, and my son has received 2 degrees, maths and economics, and I think that's the capacity building that is needed to be successful. Referring to Alfa-Bank, we growth by 2-3% per year, 20-30% per year, but no head count growth, and the general reduction of the headcount of the companies will be another trend. That's about it.
So mixing technical and emotional skills, I think, is going to be a critical aspect. And if I'm looking at the future, I particularly think that we need to look at our skills very differently because of artificial intelligence, because machines can learn everything that humans are being taught, or can they? And I guess, Oleg, as you're investing heavily in artificial intelligence, can machines take over all the human jobs, or do you think there'll still be jobs for humans in 15 years?
Well, undoubtedly, machines cannot take over all the functions of humans, but the key routinely non-creative skills can be replaced by machines. In our company, 30% of all incoming calls are serviced by bots. As for the outgoing calls, they are also done by bots. Bots are talking to our customers, so the HR and the staff figure would be undoubtedly more inspiring for Peter if we would not be having the active use of AI. And every single day we are investing a lot of money. Actually, after the lunch break, we're going to have a separate session on AI, where our Vice President, Konstantin Markelov, will be in detail telling you what we're doing. I'll be happy to invite you there. It will be a more focused conversation on AI. I'll be very general. I will tell you that we invest huge money into that because we believe there is big potential, and AI will undoubtedly be replacing the key routinary functions, and we're very pleased to say that we're doing that already. On the 15th second of a conversation, we fully understand who is calling us, and the amount of fraud has decreased dramatically because of that. So we're using AI directly, and we were the first one on the financial market globally to be courageous enough to launch a pilot project of using voice assistant. We launched it about half a year ago. That's a voice assistant called Oleg with an AI. It is young and not as smart as Alisa by Yandex. As you know, girls and women generally becoming more mature quickly than boys. Boys lag behind in their development, but we hope we'll be able to pick up with a voice assistant by Yandex called Alice, who is a girl, the faster. When our voice assistant Oleg, a boy, a male voice assistant, will become more mature, he'll be more competitive than a female voice assistant. So the competition is ongoing, but in this regard, Oleg is still a teenager. But I would agree to what Peter has said about emotional and social intellect. It is more important today. You cannot digitalize or replace creative thinking and creativity. So in Russian, we would call it chuika. Well, you know, this sixth sense, I would say, or the serendipity feeling that cannot be duplicated. Of all the people we have working for us at the head office, the actual bankers are just around 3,000 people. As for the rest, those are service functions. We are constantly trying to enhance the quality of services we're offering to our clients. There are many of them. We need to service all of them. That's why we are ranked #1 on bankia.ru on all the customer service criteria, because we have 25,000 employees servicing our customers. That's exactly why. In our head office, we have 3,000 people. The average age of them is 26. And I see that there is a clear shift from the robotized employees we need. So generally, I see it as a market problem and a problem of big IT companies like Kaspersky Lab and Yandex and Mail, because it is becoming increasingly difficult to hire people who think creatively out of the box. And it's wonderful we get our alumni in partnership with the leading tech universities. So we have partnership with Sirius on FinTech generation. We have our own cooperation with the Department of Key Technical Universities in Russia on AI as well. But we see that the business is being promoted by somewhat different people. Those guys are great from the viewpoint of structuring of processes and keeping those processes going. But the one who actually invent these ideas are people with different background, with different type of education, or as in this case, without any education at all. So it would be wrong to think that AI would replace everything and everyone. And more than that, I think in a modern education, what we see in people who belong to the so-called Z generation, we see that there is less element of creativity. They lack it. And we are searching for those people, and we lack them dramatically. People who are smart, creative, and courageous, please come to Tinkoff Bank. We'll be happy to have you.
Creativity and emotional intelligence is going to be critical, and it's interesting that you think the Generation Z are not developing that enough. I keep saying we need to teach children things that machines cannot learn, which is emotion, and something that our educational system hasn't actually understood very well so far. I think our educational system has to change dramatically. TS, I mean, when we look at what's happening with the world over the next 15 years and technology, obviously artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud, and the whole nature of tokenization is changing the game. Do you think we'll still have cards around in 15 years, or will we have a completely different payments and financial system?
Sure, so I'll get to that question in just a second. I actually wanted to comment for a minute on the discussion about machines not being able to learn the emotionality and stuff like that. I think I deeply, deeply want to believe that the emotional aspect, emotional intelligence, and the spontaneity and everything else that makes me an individual cannot be replicated, right? I deeply want to believe that. But there's this interesting story about this app called Replica. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. It was built by this incredibly smart woman after a very close friend of hers, in fact, a Russian entrepreneur, a friend of hers died. And she really missed this friend. So she wrote this program which basically mined the text message exchanges that she and her friend had had over the last 2 or 3 years to create a virtual bot that would respond like he would have, and actually did so with a shocking amount of accuracy, right? Whatever the conversation, especially if there's 3 years, 4 years of data of text exchanges, you can build a replica of a personality in a pretty darn good way. Right? It's not the same thing as emotional intelligence. It's not the same thing as the spontaneity of a real human interaction. But the extent to which you can replicate a person based on the data that's available is striking. So, I really want to believe that nobody will replicate me. But yeah, I think the jury may be a little bit out on that. Now to your question, Chris, right? Will cards be around in 15 years? So let me just break this question up a little bit. Most of you know what Visa is and hopefully users of Visa. And people describe us in different ways. People say it's a card company, payment company, and so on. If you break it up, we're 3 or 4 things, right? The first is the credentials, right? The credit card number or the debit card number is a proxy for a credential of the person that says, this is TS Anil, or this is, Oleg Tinkoff. So there's a credential. There is an acceptance, which is the 50 million merchants. When you walk into a merchant's store, the fact that they accept that credential and say, yes, I recognize this credential and I will let you take this bag of groceries because, I believe I will get paid, is the next thing, is the acceptance. The third is the form factor, right? And your question, Chris, may be about the form factor in that, will plastic cards be around in 15 years? But the fourth aspect, which is really what Visa is about, is a network of trust. The fact that when I walk into a store in Sochi, I live in California, I walk into a store in Sochi, I can buy goods worth $1,000 and leave the store without giving the person, gold coins or currency or anything that they understand as value, because my credential was trusted. Right? So that trust aspect is, in the network is massively important. It's why banks do business with each other, merchants and consumers do business with each other, and so on. And that trust goes beyond borders. It's a cross-border global thing. So now if you think about Visa like that and say, will cards be around in 15 years? Let me answer the form factor question. Right? Will physical cards, plastic cards be around? And my suspicion is yes. And the reason I say yes is because in many countries, it might vanish completely. In many countries, it may, there may be entirely a digital form factor, a smartphone, thought waves, who knows. But that same person, when they travel to go on a holiday to Thailand, and in Thailand, they want to go to a small beach shack and order a cocktail, that person may not accept that same form factor. So they might keep the card just when they travel. Right? It's a possibility. So my own gut says that physical form factor is probably going to be around for a while, not so much for your own domestic markets, but for cross-border users in remote parts of the world. But the other aspects of what I just described the network as being about will continue to evolve. Right? Credentials will change. Credentials today have a number. They may be biometric in nature in the future. There may be something else around the credential. But the idea of a credential will remain. The idea of acceptance, people that participate in a network will remain. And then ultimately, the most important piece, which is the idea of trust, has got to remain. It's the only way two people do business with each other. Right? 5,000 years ago, our ancestors operated in tribes because a tribe had a code of trust. And when they came upon a different tribe, they typically started killing each other. And if they weren't killing each other, they traded, but they traded physical goods. I will give you my cow if you give me 2 bags of rice, right? And so the idea of trust will remain a really important thing for the world, and I expect we will continue to evolve as a company in how we deliver that trust.
Thank you, Tias. It's quite interesting because we talk about trust, and when I give my presentation after this panel, I'll talk more about trust, because trust is organized by regulation and the government saying that you can actually believe in this institution, which is why banks have licenses and why Visa has a licensed network. And so, Elvira, I wanted to come to you and maybe talk about regulation and trust in the next 15 years. And in particular, I asked TS, would cards exist? Will cash exist in 15 years, or will it be digitalized?
I will answer this question, but if I may, before I'd like to react to the earlier discussion, I was extremely happy to hear and to say that we do have differences and we view differently on what is the business model of the future, the role of digital, the role of emotional intelligence. That means that we as a society of consumers have some space for choice. And right now we are speaking about what will happen in 15 years, but if we try to imagine that 15 years ago a conversation onto what will be the meaning of a successful business model in a bank would be focused on a conversation as to whether a machine can be learned to be emotionally intelligent, I think everybody would be thinking that we think about something that has nothing to do with reality, that we've lost touch with reality. But now we are actually talking about things that might define the business model of the future, and it is a clear confirmation of the fact that the world is changing and how it is changing. By the way, coming to the issue of plastic cards and banking cards, it might be that the cards will disappear in a certain time, but we tend to forget about the cross-border aspect. People travel a lot. And even if there will be a very well-developed biometrical acquiring when you come to a supermarket and you do not need a smartphone or nor a bank card, your biometric data is being scanned and you take your products and you go away. But you might not be able to do the same thing if you go abroad. Or we have to make sure that the countries exchange biometrical data, and it is very hard for me to imagine that that would happen in the future. So I would say some kind of traditional tools of payment will remain for quite a long time, also because of the fact that on the intergovernmental level, we will not be prepared to the level of cooperation that is required for the application of new technologies. Speaking of cash, Mr. Oseevsky from Rostelecom just said that cash is to stay and it will not disappear. I would not agree to that. I do not know when the cash will disappear, but we do see that cashless society is almost a reality today in many countries. Let us think why people want to use cash and why they keep money in cash. Not because it is safe or because it is comfortable. It is much more convenient and safer to use cashless sources. But there are two aspects to that. The first one is desire of anonymity, and it is only cash that gives you this level of anonymity. And the second is again a factor of trust towards financial institutions and towards the stability and sustainability of financial institutions, because we see problems happening with the banks. And I guess the stability of financial institutions is something that we will tackle and we will resolve soon. But as for the issues of anonymity, the more transparency we will get in the society, the more people in the society are ready to be transparent, the less there is a need to aim for tax evasion, the better we would see the development of cashless transactions and cashless societies. By the way, the issue of cryptocurrencies that is asked frequently. I guess one of the reasons for emergence and rise of cryptocurrencies is the desire for anonymity. Of course, there were many trends coming to that, but clearly one of the reasons for that was that you managed to avoid a whole number of restrictions by using cryptocurrencies. That is why, if people want a convenient electronic form of replacement of cash, there is a demand for cryptocurrencies, and the regulators have to be aware of it. And we have to develop the services that are convenient for people. Nonetheless, we do see certain risks coming with cryptocurrencies, and many central banks believe likely, because many cryptocurrencies are designed as a replacement to fiat money issued by the central banks. And we undoubtedly see risks for the sustainability of monetary policy. Those are potential risks. They are not accurate now because the share of cryptocurrencies is very low marginally. And therefore, in order to satisfy the actual demand of the people in a convenient way with something else rather than cash, many central banks are thinking of issuing their own digital currencies. And we see Scandinavian countries talking about that. Yesterday, we've been hearing to what our colleagues from the Central Bank of China were saying. For us, as the Central Bank of Russia, it is not that obvious at the moment. We also see certain risks associated with that. If there are digital currencies issued by the central banks, it might considerably impact the foundation of operations of the banking system, of Tier 2 banking system, if people would be authorized to have a deposit as a central bank that would be issuing digital currencies. The choice for the consumer would be obvious, and who would be the one offering loans? There are different schedules to that. The one chosen by China that foresees operations via commercial banks. But we believe there are other problems associated with that. Our policy is to develop the services that are wanted by the population. And if they are efficient, people would go less towards cryptocurrencies. For example, fast payment systems that are developing very actively in Russia. And we, as a central bank, are creating the necessary infrastructure to make sure that all participants of the market are free to develop their fast payment services. Of course, there will be an issue of cross-border payments, and we've been discussing that earlier. We also cooperate with the different payment systems in order to make sure that those services are convenient for the people. Nonetheless, if cash is not to disappear very quickly. And by the way, I'd like to remind you, you might remember that several years ago, we've been discussing potential law drafts that would ban use of cash in certain areas. And where the central bank decided that it is not good to ban something, it is better to offer an alternative that is more convenient, to make sure that people find it convenient to use cashless services. And we do see this trend evolving. Several years ago, the share of cashless payment was around 30%. For this year, the figure would be around 65%. And we think this share will grow further. We might not reach 100%, but I'm sure it will grow further. So we will have this diversity. And the key thing is to listen and hear what the consumer wants and provide secure and safe services. By us, I mean primarily all the participants of the financial sector. And we as a regulator will create best conditions for that.
I've got a couple of questions for Mikhail and Elena, but just before I ask them those questions, Oleg and Petr, do you think cash and cards will disappear? And how will that change bank structures if cash and cards disappear? And we just move to digital tokens?
I don't think cash will disappear in Russia in the near future, but as Elvira Zahipsadovna said, the trend is obvious. When we launched Tinkoff Bank, 90% was drawing cash using the cards, and 10% is POS, and now it's vice versa. We have POS for 90% and drawing cash is 20%. The trend is obvious. Whether cash will be gone for good, I think in this country it's a political issue. Because on the whole, I would like to raise the following issue. What's the highest difficulty for the Russian banks? The Russian banks are in the middle of the triad. On one hand, there are lawmakers, there are regulators that instill on us to abide by laws, and we as a law-abiding bank do that. On the other hand, there are clients that demand more services. Some time ago, we were one of the first to do an online transfer, and it was a shock. It would take 3 days to make a bank transfer, and now if it's a second delay, they start bombarding chatbot, where's my money? I have clicked the button 1 second ago. So the clients would like to have better services. It is fair. And on the other hand, there are a lot of fraudsters, and it's not only a Russian problem. There are many offenders in the other countries as well, and they make use of the loopholes in the applicable law, and there are conflicts in the law, clashes in the law, and we are discussing it with Mr. Aksakov, and regulators bear the initiatives that are not well thought of, and something that Mr. Shvetsov is doing now regarding the qualified investors. So the regulators of crime and customers, and we'll have to appease them all. It's very difficult for us to do that. We have to be law-abiding. We want to help our clients to appease it, and the crime is making use of it. They make use of the loopholes and our activity to us to try to make it comfortable for the customers. And the crime is turned to us because we know we work fast. And we are inside this triad, inside this triangle, as well as the other banks. And social media is very strong, and banks struggle because of the federal law 115, because of the law on compliance, and we are under pressure. We don't know what shall we do in the future. If we fulfill law, then the bad banks are not competing in goodwill, and the request is for the regulators to help us. And as a result, the brands are attacked, and no one puts the blame on Kalashnikov, AK, and he was a great inventor. And the problem with the deaths is not that of Kalashnikov, but the person who pulled the trigger. And we are just an AK-47 that are fulfilling the orders. Talking about cash and cryptocurrencies, and for many years I've been stating that I do not believe in cryptocurrency, and I agree with Elvira that cryptocurrency emerged because people, well, tried to hide something. They were creating the parallel world that will not be seen by the state. It is an illusion, and I always used to say that the cryptocurrency will only mean something for me when it will be possible to pay taxes, because I was taught in the university that money is not money until it is used to pay taxes. When the state will recognize them as money, then all the other things is just rubbish. And I think the emergence of cryptocurrency is a sort of belief in the illusion of decentralization. Blockchains and cryptocurrency give the illusion that you can bypass the state. But no, it's not the case. And we can see the growing capacity of the state to observe, to supervise everything. So there's a controversy. On one hand, you are just on your own, you can even invent currency, but no, the state is all observant and all pervasive, and the illusions will be lost. I read a piece of information in New York. They forbid to publicly disclose the information. Right now, 80% of the housing in New York is sold with anonymity, but it will not be the case in the future. So I think it's illusion that you can hide your financial flows. So in the future, the financial instruments will not be working, and nobody will be hiding like bags of cash under their beds. People will be hiding their assets, but in the computers. There will be an overall, a general trend of disappearance of cash, but decentralization is an illusion, and I think the cryptocurrencies will be gone. I would like to comment as well, and I could feel the pain that Oleg is talking about, and he's not the only one, and there are requirements of clients. The customers would like to have it cheap and fast. I don't know why I'm the only one talking about. No, you're not the brave. You're not the bravest. Everyone is talking about that, and we are hearing that. But on the other hand, our regulatory requirements are not out of the blue. Compliance, anti-laundering is a must, and I don't agree that banks are neutral. And giving you example of AK-47, we as a state of a society should not be indifferent. If mass media, there is propaganda of terrorism, and we cannot be possibly impartial with respect to channels, and we cannot be unbiased with respect to the bank channels. Fraudsters should not use banking channels, and I do not agree that it is not actually the responsibility of the bank, and it is the responsibility of those who pull the trigger. So the compliance should be in place. What we want to do is to make compliance more comfortable for the banks, and it is difficult to do that. I like the experience of Singapore, and Singapore government have taken up the responsibility of KYC, and they provide information to the banks, and they can do that real fast. Seconds are needed for that. If there is a need to transfer money between two physical persons, it takes a second to do that, and then KYC procedure should take seconds. And we are working along the lines, and I know how fast we will do, but we need to work together, and I do not see any other way, because the requirements will be there. We will try to make them transparent, risk-oriented, together with the ROS monitoring watchdog, but the requirements will be there, and the financial system and us will have to learn to work in the new conditions, and we should understand together how to make it convenient for you.
Compliance, regulation, risk and fraud is always a key topic, and I'm aware that we could have this discussion for quite some time, but I did want to talk to Mikhail and Elena at the end here, who I haven't included for a while. And Mikhail, one of the things that's coming very soon is 5G, and I'm fairly sure 6G, 7G, and by 2035, 10G. What can we expect in the world of technology developments over the next 15 years, and particularly how telecoms and technology and finance might change through those developments?
Even today, large telecom companies are very diverse in because of the sphere of their activity. We are not only telecom, but we are a provider of digital services for business and private companies and the state, and we are running comprehensively global projects, and from this perspective we are talking that there will be a convergence of all into everybody, and I have only one obligation for Elvira. Telecom will never turn into a financial or banking entity. Talking about our vision of technological trends, I should say that in the near future there is no alternative of transferring data other than fiber optics, and fast rate, velocity, and new solutions on spectral compaction will be developing, and this technology, fiber optic transfer, will be dominant. Right now, people know how to lay underwater cables or laid some in the virgin lands. Right now we are laying a cable in tundra on the coast of the Arctic Ocean. So this technology will be dominant. Of course, mobile wireless technologies will be developing. I don't know whether it will be 5G or 6G or the others. They will be developing, and the velocity of 5G is 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabyte per second. And I remember our modems were working 256 bytes per second, and we were overly happy. It was great. And of course, the use of those technologies will stay. There's high on the agenda in Russia the use of satellite nets. There's OneWeb and the others, and I think these technologies will be developing in the world. But Russia is somewhat different, is greatly, in fact, different from the countries and continents, because right now the rate of penetration of fixed internet and the mobile internet is at a very high level. We have 75-78% coverage, and in a few years it will be 92-93% coverage, because there'll be no place where humans and businesses will not be able to reach through satellite nets, despite the vastness of this country. It is quite possible that there might some new disruptive technologies that will emerge. We are doing quantum encryption. It is a new technology, and we are implementing it in practice. We did some pilot tests to transfer information for hundreds of kilometers encrypted, and I think quantum encryption in the near future will be one of the ways to transfer information, to transmit information.
Thank you, Mikhail. And yeah, quantum is definitely on the agenda in 2035. And it may actually replace nearly all the infrastructure that we've implemented today, so that's a big question. But I wanted to finish the panel with Elena, because Elena, you run an educational service that develops kids and children's capabilities in the arts and humanities, and I think over the next 15 years, the biggest challenge, and I touched on it earlier, is going to be how we develop the next generation. What are the skills? So I'd like you to kick off the final discussion around what we will look for in humans in the next 15 years. And again, if any other panelists would like to comment on this, that's great. But Elena, please, give me your insights around what humans will be looking like 15 years from now.
That depends how we will educate them and what environment they will be educated in. And I think there will be a combination of online and offline education, and there is the situation makes it possible to develop capacity no matter where you live. So one important driver for capacity building is the environment that children live and study in. And there are certain skills and educational and knowledge which you can receive only face-to-face. We take that into account in serious school, and children can study elsewhere, and then they come to serious and to have face-to-face tutoring. What other trends we notice and we make use of? programming, for example. And it is clear that school children should be taught in programming. And we have many cases that school children are great in programming. We have a schoolboy, Yegor, who participated in a programming competition when he was 5 grader, and when he was 15 he became a winner of the programming Olympiad. So it is a trend to teach programming in schools, and it sets up the foundation to study sciences. Or take financial literacy. It's not possible to do mathematics, not just something that we study in comprehensive school, but it is the mathematics which enables you to make choice the correct one out of the two choices, and there is a list of all the possible ways, and you can take your pick and find the best one. And I think that all those attendees who are in this conference hall should come to mix with people in the school children, and they explain what you are doing in your life. It is necessary to show them what are the future jobs for them, and that's why we are grateful to the participants of the large challenges program. And we have school children who can write codes for Alice and Oleg's, and they can respond to cyber attacks against financial organizations. And it is important to tell them what are the challenges in the future jobs, to motivate them, to provide incentives for capacity building. We understand that the education change should not be disrupted in the universities. That is a triviality. It is very much important to show the long-term development plan for the kids, and this is the key idea that we are setting up in Sochi. It is the serious university, and the university will have a creative atmosphere, and it is the university where novelties will be generated and implemented. All together we can contribute to that.
Let me add one piece to what Elena said. By the way, a ton of respect for you, since you're the one who's actually investing in the future generation. So, one of my favorite quotes about this whole space goes like this: in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that does not exist. So the idea that the capacity and aptitude and attitude to embrace learning and adapting, I think, is really one of the hallmarks for the next few years.
In fact, I was going to ask each of the panelists just to close, to build on Elena's comments, and Mikhail, maybe you can begin, and then Oleg and Petr and Vera. But what do you think will be the most critical competencies 15 years from now?
My first idea on that is that the generation to come will enter the workforce earlier, will start working earlier. Already today we see many talented guys that we are scouting for together with Elena start working already at 18, and at 18 they're indeed ready to be employed at their key areas of competences. The other question is whether they are ready as an individuals completely to participate in the business community, but from the viewpoint of core competences, it is a reality. Maybe even earlier we're doing Olympiads for school children. For students, they come to us, they discuss the issues of IT security, and already at the age of 14 or 15, they are experts and they can successfully compete with people who are in their 20s or 30s. So certainly the labor market will be becoming younger, and that is also a certain challenge. We need to learn how to interact with them, how to employ them efficiently. And undoubtedly, they are the people much more emotional than we are. Already today, they react actively to the injustice they see, to the corruption they encounter, to the absence of equal playground and equal opportunities. And that will be a new serious signal for the employers. And older generations do not seem to be that proactive in this regard. And that is great that the new ones are very active in this one.
Okay, would you like to add anything?
What will happen in 15 years? That's a good question. I keep thinking about that when I watch my own children grow. Well, undoubtedly, math is becoming increasingly important. And today, mathematical education is a must. And in this regard, we in Russia are very lucky. Traditionally, we've been having great mathematical school already at the school level. And I think deep learning of math, thorough knowledge and understanding of math will be increasingly popular. So probably we will not be very much needing the so-called economists. Sorry, I might upset the audience. I do not really know why we need economists. Maybe we need around 3 of them, but thousands of economists. Economists are people who are just playing in some kind of rhetoric exercises. Investment bankers are the same economists. Why do we need economists on top of economists? I have no idea. Math and, as I said earlier, social intelligence. But you can't teach that. Creativity, talent, you can't teach it. Those are inborn qualities. You can hardly acquire them. So the winners will be people like Bill Gates, like Mark Zuckerberg. So the importance of people of the level like Nikolai Storonsky, our colleague from Russia, and people like people at Alfa-Bank, Artyom Yamanov, those are the people who can be both great mathematicians but also very creative. Those are the people who will lead and dominate in the 21st century. Because using your inborn talent alone, like in my case, or just great math skills like Petr, you cannot go any further. If I may, I would add something to that as well. Well, I think this combination of soft skills and hard skills necessary to work in the financial sector would be no much difference from the skills of a person of a future generally. I'm convinced that technical skills, math, and soft skills have always been important and will remain important. Just the size of knowledge is getting bigger, soft skills are developing, but what I really would like to see is a possibility of a person to sympathize, to express empathy, and to cooperate. It is important for financial trust and general trust in the society, so that we have trust not just on the internet and the machines, but we trust people. Only that would secure the development of the society and financial system. Well, I think the younger generation, and Oleg to a large degree, represent the younger generation in the amazing meaning of this word. Despite grey hair, Oleg is a very young person. And I think the quality of the young people we see is this unique combination of emotional intelligence and high level of IQ, and actually math competences and knowledge in humanities. And I fully agree to Madam Nabiullina, being able to talk to people, work with people, but also the self-confidence that is so typical for Oleg. And the current generation is much more confident in their skills and their potential than the generation of the Soviet people. And they have this spirit of freedom because we see fundamental changes in the society. And this is a colossal freedom of choice, because we used to grow up in a country where there was no choice, not just political choice, but any choice. 2 types of sausages, 1 type of cheese, not much to choose from even in the supermarket. But the new generation can choose anything, where to work, how to work, what to do, and the place of work and the desktop as such would be disappearing. There would be just different distributed teams working from home a lot or from any other point of the globe. And that alone would change the situation dramatically. And the same applies to decentralization trend. For the CEOs, the key thing would be how to connect this desire for freedom and decentralization and how that would tune in to a teamwork and work of a company that can achieve great objectives. So there's combination of greater freedom and the desire to build something together. This is the key challenge for the new generation, combination of very different qualities.
I have to say that's a really fascinating discussion. I've written down lots of notes, which I'll probably blog about later. But I really thank you so much to Mikhail, Elena, TS, Oleg, Petr, and Elvira. Thank you so much.